Hello everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and we're going to be talking about some crazy mint errors today. We're going to be focused on the theme of sort of false planchets, so that could be something like a fragment coin error, it could be something like a feeder finger coin error, or it could be something totally different. Split planchets, we've got some totally it shouldn't be even struck on this. It's going to be struck on a nail. I'll give you a little spoiler. That one was many tens of thousands of dollars, but we're going to also be speaking with an error dealer and collector named Travis, who's appeared on some of our previous publications. Let's head into the presentation and go for it. So now we've got some of the incredible examples that I was just referring to in the form of not only fragments, but also false planchets and feeder finger errors. So we're going to be covering all of these different types of crazy planchets. The prices on these are often quite high. I think one of our lower priced ones is going to be the first one. But Travis, thanks for joining us today. Any
Thank you
comments
for having
about
me.
this, before we get into our first coin? We'll start with the fragment.
I would say in general, this category of fragments and non-planchet, false planchets, these are one of my favorite error types just because they're so often so strange looking, and I think they're just cool, where sometimes they're just regular everyday objects that have been struck as a coin, like this nail or the washer. And the feeder fingers are probably my favorite error type.
Well, we've got a few at the end, so that'll be a good way
All
of
right.
finale.
Yeah.
Our first one, though, it is that struck fragment, the 1962 Lincoln cent, sold for $1,100 over a decade ago. How do these struck fragments even come about?
Obviously, during the course of making blanks and planchets, there's a lot of metal involved. So you're going to have weird, odd shaped fragments that happen from time to time, like this 1962 cent. This one is die struck on both sides. It is not uncommon on a little fragment like this to have it be uniface on one side because it was struck with another probably normal size planchet. And so you'll often see quote unquote normal coins, or at least the diameter is normal, but they have a struck through or an indentation made by a struck fragment. And there are mated pairs out there of the two that do exist.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Is it more common to see this sort of thing on a cent, or do the struck fragments sort of extend to any denomination?
They can be any denomination, but pretty much like any other error, cent, just because they make so many, is the most common denomination that you're going to see for struck fragments.
Cool. I think our next one is still a struck fragment, goes back a little further though. It's a 3 cent nickel. And this one, obviously, a little bit of a higher price. I was sort of wondering maybe this is a brockage, but maybe not. I'm not totally sure what we're looking at, but it looks like a really cool and spectacular error.
Yeah, I like this one as well. I believe that that is not a brockage and that it's actually a very thin fragment that was sitting on top of a planchet, like I was describing earlier. And it's thin enough that you're seeing the impression show through rather than it being struck atop an already struck coin and making a brockage.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean,
I
I
could
think
be wrong, but this doesn't look like a brockage to me.
yeah, just yeah, super sort of out of the ordinary, and I wasn't sure what I saw, so I figured it would be good inclusion for this. I think our next one we're going to pivot. It still is a fragment, but this is like a split planchet fragment. It's 2.5 grams, so not not even half of the $half, but there's still a good amount of it there. Sold for 2,200, as you can see. Again, still pretty strong pricing on most of these. Is this why A? Is it just graded MS instead of having a grade from NGC? And also,
Okay.
any other comments about this that you would have?
I like this one because it's a Franklin half and it's silver, obviously. There's a category of errors that are struck on a split planchet as opposed to this one, which is a split planchet fragment, where on the reverse side, where you can see the striations within the metal, but it would just be, if it was just a split planchet, would be full diameter. And those are usually found on Lincoln cents struck on a split planchet before the strike. NGC, as far as the grade or lack thereof, NGC, as a practice for some error types, they do not assign a numeric grade. That's usually blank planchets, unstruck planchets. Really weakly struck coins, often called die adjustment strikes. They usually don't put a numeric grade. I think they kind of draw the line on if the design details aren't well struck, then they decline to give it a grade.
Okay, good to know. I wasn't really sure, and it's sort of neat to see something again. It's not like a error that gets mass produced where there's tons of these floating around. So good to have some more clarification on it. The next one I think is the coolest, maybe out there error, certainly one of the top 10, I think, to exist. I'd heard of it in advance of this presentation, struck on a nail. I mean, it's literally a dime that has been put onto a nail. I mean, is there any backstory from an experienced error collector perspective in terms of how this might have been produced, gotten out of the mint, anything like that?
This one's funny because this did get some national press, in mainstream news when it went up for sale, which I remember at the time. I really, really like this coin, even though I feel it is most likely was deliberately made, maybe not, smuggled out, but there's nothing stopping a mint worker from making something like this and just throwing it into a bin of normally struck coins and letting it go out the door, potentially. I have seen other coins struck on nails, at least, well, I can think of two off the top of my head, but both were a lot smaller and could basically fit within the collar and within the striking chamber of the press, and they weren't way oversized like this example. But this is, to me, a really, really great error. I absolutely love this one.
Yeah, I mean, is the idea, do you think that it was like smuggled out, or do you think somebody was just messing around and said, this will show up on the news someday, let me do something cool?
That's hard to say. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I being that I've never worked for the mint, it's really hard to say how easily somebody could smuggle something out. But I think it's probably pretty safe to say that it was intentionally made one way or the other.
And do you think that the auction estimate, I mean, I remember there was like a Del Monte sticker that
Yes.
was on
The,
and it
it's a
expanded from like 10,000 or 20,000 to like 400,000. Do you think that this
yeah,
could have that parabolic increase?
uh that's a good question. I think for this particular piece, probably not, but man, you never know. I am aware of that Del Monte note. It's a $20 note, which
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that error as well.
No, it was cool and fun to learn about. And the
Oh
video that
yeah.
I did on it was very well received. So I was happy that people
Oh,
wanted to view it.
yeah.
This one, I know you said you really liked. I've seen struck on steel washers in the past. I don't know if this is like part of the mint and it breaks off and the washer ends up there, or if it's just a stray object that gets struck on. This one for $5,000 looks pretty nice. Eye appeal wise, is the steel washer common to see coins struck on, or what's the
It
deal?
is not common. I know of a handful out there, and I really like these as opposed to the nail that we just looked at, because this could fit in a press without any assistance, could be, mechanically fed in by the machinery. And the fact that it looks so much like a planchet that it could, end up getting struck accidentally fairly easily. And I just like the whole look of it with the center hole. So yeah, these are also one of my favorite errors, is coins struck on washers like this. This is a good one just because it's a nice grade and the centering is real nice. So yeah, it's just a really, really great coin.
Yeah, I really like the centering on it. And then it's also like you can see most of the design details. It's well struck. It's not like it was a super mushy strike. So I think it
Yeah,
does stand out as being nice. Our next one, I thought, sort of to segue into the feeder fingers, which I know you really like. I
I
love
do.
this one. It's got the full feeder finger as opposed to like a fragment, which sort of loops in with the first type of error. And we'll have a few of those ahead. But this one sold for a nice 5-figure sum. What's even the purpose of a feeder finger, and then how do they end up, how does something end up looking like this? Because you'd imagine if it would break off and it's a different type of metal that would get struck a ton of times. Instead, we have one really nice strike where a Maryland quarter is sort of perfectly placed right on it.
Yeah, this one is really crazy. because all of the other US coins struck on feeder fingers that I'm aware of are all just the broken off tip, basically the area that this one has that's been struck by the dies, and the rest of the assembly is not there. So this one is really outrageous because you have the rest of the feeder finger assembly. These, when they first came out, were labeled as being on aluminum scrap because nobody knew what these really were. The purpose in the press of the feeder finger is to help feed the planchet into the press and to get it back out as a struck coin. And then obviously once in a while the press gets out of whack and the feeder finger itself gets struck. There's every denomination known from cent to dollar struck on feeder finger tips, all combined. I want to say that there's a couple, 3 dozen total amongst all the denominations, but this is the only one that I know of where it has the full assembly, like the entire feeder finger is present.
No, it's almost a helpful visual to understand that this is the feeder finger that's helping direct those, or I guess feed them. Then here's what it looks like when it's an aluminum piece of scrap that's probably prone to multiple strikes just because it's not a proper planchet, so it might stay in the dies longer. And we see some really cool results coming out.
Yeah.
$3,000, a nice, really attractive, bright coin here. Anything on this
one? Usually these feeder fingers, when you see them, are struck more than once. And oftentimes they kind of have a dark grayish black kind of toning on them, which this one doesn't really seem to have, which I kind of suspect what I'm calling toning might just be more ingrained, dirt from being used in the press. That's my assumption anyway.
Yeah, this one looks nice. I was going to move to the next one.
This would be an example of that grayish black toning that I'm talking about, which most of these feeder fingers end up exhibiting to some degree. This one's probably more on the dark side than what is typical, but they usually come with this look to them.
And does it make sense that this sold for so much more, $10,900, or is that more of a function of not Sacagawea errors?
It does, because it's $1. Yeah, generally the higher donation, the higher the sales price that it's going to sell for this type of error, and really pretty much every other type of error. That's also true.
I think our last coin is going to be, there's a little bit more of a tip to it. This one sold for 5,000, so a little bit of an increase from the prior dime, which had some attractive, triple strike. This one's double struck. Is this more rare to see part of the feeder finger?
Yes, with having the tip visible. So this is one of the things that makes it a little more desirable, is that you have the actual tip being unstruck and still attached to the coin. Mm-hmm. So that'll make it sell for a little bit higher price. One of the reasons why I like these feeder finger coins so much is that it's because it's a piece of the coin press itself that's been struck, which I think makes it more special than some other piece of, a random fragment or some other sort of incomplete, defective planchet of some kind, where you can have something that was an actual piece of the press machinery. And that's why I like these so much.
Yeah.
I own an example myself.
No, that's always fun, and it's an error that I was only made aware of because you had mentioned and explained it to me that was one of your favorites. So it's sort of cool to have the feeder finger collector talking about it. Are there any other false planchets that maybe we didn't cover that you would briefly want to go over, or are these really some of the main ones?
Well, I'm trying to think. There's at least one. I think that there's more, of a silver eagle that was struck on a 3M sanding disc. Is an example I can think of.
Yeah.
That's one that comes to mind right away, is that it was a piece of a sanding disc struck by coin dies. There's probably other ones. I'm just kind of drawing a blank at the moment.
No, that I recognize that one, and that's really, I appreciate you coming on today and speaking about these. It's always fun to talk about something that I'm interested in, but also get a lot of information from you. So thanks for talking to the viewers today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching the video. I'd encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated. I've also got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so you can follow me there. TreasureTownYT.com is the main channel website. Definitely give that a visit. I've got a lot of information about me up there and the channel. CoinGrabBag.com as well currently redirects there, but it's some good opportunities for very fair grab bags, both made by me and other sellers. A lot of different options, so that's a good way to support. There's also TreasureTownCoins.com. In the future, my coin dealing operation will be done out of that website. CoinMeltPrice.com for updates on the melt prices of your coins, both US and world. A lot of resources in that website. And then CoinsMetalsCards.com being developed right now as a marketplace and news source for coins, metals, cards, and collectibles in general. So I'll see you on my future videos. Looking forward to seeing you there, and hope you have a good day.